Today we're talking about the ARRI Amira camera. This is our latest and greatest camera here at BrainBox. Lots of really cool, exciting things to talk about, so let's dive into it right now and we'll get going. So just starting on the operator side here, people always ask, how do you turn it on? Power button is right here. Hold that down for a couple of seconds and it powers right up. You have your little LCD screen here that gives you general camera information. Under this little protective slot is where your memory cards are stored. The Amira takes CFast 2.0 cards. We have two of them loaded in here as well. You also have two USB ports for loading in custom user files or matching settings between cameras, or even loading on custom 3D LUTs that you might want to be sharing between cameras as well. You also have an Ethernet port here for doing Ethernet settings if you wanted to be controlling the camera on some sort of a local area network. You have two little antennas sticking up on the back of the camera. These are for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The camera does have Bluetooth, so you can monitor audio via like a Bluetooth headset if you really want to, as well as Wi-Fi controls for controlling the camera settings over Wi-Fi, which is pretty awesome. Obviously, the big red button is your record, start, stop. The camera also has pre-record functions, which means you can set pre-record buffer times where it will be constantly recording on a buffer like between 1 or 5 seconds. These are 4 user programmable buttons, but you actually have 8 button functionalities here. So with these top 4 here, like if you wanted to press user button 1, press it here. But if I want to press user button 5, I could then press what's kind of like a shift key down here, and then go up here and press 5, and then it would give me the action that was programmed to user button 5. So moving right along, we have the EI switch. This is your exposure index. It's also similar to being an ISO setting. Native ISO for the Amira is 800, same as the Alexa, which makes sense because they share the exact same sensor as the Alexa. 800 is pretty good, but you could also bump that up higher or lower depending on your shooting situation. And because this is an Alexa, because it's an ARRI, bumping it up higher will give you more noise, but the noise is very organic, very clean, and you really don't start seeing noise until they get above like around 1600. Then you start to see a little bit, but even at that point, it's still fairly pleasing to the eye. So you can control the settings between 1, 2, and 3. Right now they're preset. Like if we look over on the monitor, you can see how it changes as I hit the switch between 1, 2, and 3. And up here on the menu screen, it's telling you as well. So my position 1 is set at 400, 2 is 800, and 3 is 1600. And like I said, you can go into the menus, customize those settings so that the switch can go through whatever 3 settings you like. Okay, so let's talk really quickly about white balance. That's your third user switch here on the bottom. WB, white balance. You have 4 settings. You can go ahead and program those to whatever white balance value that you like, or you can go down all the way to position number 4. Like for instance, you have position 1 set to like 3200 tungsten, position 2 set to maybe 5600 for daylight, position 3 to like maybe a cool daylight like 7000. And then you can go ahead and set number 4 to something called white balance tracking, and where the camera will try to adjust white balance based on whatever color temperature it's detecting in the frame image. You also have your auto white balance option. This button down here, go ahead and if you hit that twice, hit it once, then hit it a second time, and we'll go ahead and adjust your white balance based on what is in front of the camera at that moment. And that, like if you see over here on the monitor, I went ahead and hit that button, and it set my, it's on white balance tracking. Let me go ahead and put that back on a preset. So right now it's at a preset at 5290. If I hit the white balance tracking button twice, I'm going to pan the camera off so I can get a different value. And it went ahead and detected that should be about 5330. And you might be wondering what this number is here. This is a negative 0.8 cc. CC stands for color correction. By default, the CC value should be set to 0.0. This is going to basically just affect your magenta to green shift in the scene itself. I like to usually keep mine set at 0 just by default and do any more fine tuning in a post-production environment. But sometimes you might want to, if you're like shooting under fluorescence, you might want to shift it a little bit more towards the magenta side. So that's a useful feature as well. When you do the auto white balance calculation, it automatically tries to calculate this. Usually when you're doing a preset white balance, like a preset 3200 Kelvin tungsten or something like that, it will be at 0.0 by default. You can go into the menus specifically if you want to and dial in a specific color correction value if you need to. Okay, so you also have, right underneath your power button, you have a lock button. Pressing and holding down lock for a couple of seconds will go ahead and lock out all controls, all of these, as well as the controls on the viewfinder. That way you don't accidentally hit something while you're in the middle of a scene and mess something up. Holding that again for a few more seconds will disable it and turn it off. One thing to keep in mind is that lock does not affect your audio controls. These controls right here are primarily for setting up your audio. You have a left channel and right channel decibel adjustment knobs right here, and then you have a little control switch that gives you both info, tells me voltage, time remaining, and then gives me info on the audio input lines here. Then you have a channels 1 and 2 settings, channels 3 and 4 settings, and then a general setup menu where you can do things like test tone, enable or disable audio recording, and enable Bluetooth audio monitoring, and adjust like the brightness of the display as well if you need to turn that down if you're shooting in a nighttime environment or something. Gonna go ahead and turn this around. One of the best things about this camera is that it has built-in ND filters. You have 3 levels of ND. Right now it's set to clear. I'm going to go ahead and turn that down to 0.6. You can kind of hear the camera whirring as it's putting in place an ND filter. And it also has 2 more levels, a 1.2 and a 2.1. It takes it a second or two when you make that adjustment, but then it will lock it in. So that gives you really good control all the way up to 2.1 of ND right internally in the camera. So turning the camera back again so we can see the dummy side, we have more audio controls. So the ARRI has 3 audio XLR inputs. So, and also for inputs B and C, you also have AES3, which is a new digital audio standard. An AES3 input can carry 2 channels of digital audio. And the ARRI itself will record 4 channels of high quality, 24-bit, 48 hertz digital audio at one time, which is pretty great by itself. And let's go ahead and spin the camera around to the back. And here we see we have all of our outputs. I'm plugged in right now into SDI1. You also have a second SDI2 output, and these are individually controllable. So you can have SDI1 be just clean, going out to like a client monitor or a director's monitor with a custom lookup table applied to it, and SDI2 going to like your AC's monitor with a log C wide gamut look on it with all your menu overlays as well. Then you also have, below that, we have timecode in and out, camera sync. Our power options here, we have a 4-pin Hiroshi for accessory power, a 2-pin LEMO for accessory power. This is our power battery input for going off of a block battery, or in this case, an AC power like we're plugged into right now. This, I believe, is a 6-pin. I believe it's for some sort of external control. Not exactly sure. If I figure that out by the time we go to edit, I'll make sure to put it in the notes on the video. Also in the back, we have, this camera has a V-Lock battery plate. I can show it to you here. V-Lock battery plate with a D-tap out. You can get the ARRI with either a V-Lock or an Anton Bauer gold mount. All right, just 2 more things to quickly talk about on the exterior of the camera. You might notice we have something plugged in right here at the base of the lens mount. This is actually a run-stop cable, which is going down to the handle. So you have a run-stop button here on the handle, so you can quickly trigger the camera that way. And you also have a 12-pin Hiroshi power output on the front of the lens mount, which is really useful for powering like an ENG servo style zoom lens. It's not hooked up right now, but it is there as an option. So let's talk a little bit about the ARRI viewfinder, which is this little device right here. The viewfinder on the ARRI is great. It's super sharp. The operator gets a really nice image. You can focus the image inside the viewfinder by this little ring up here at the top. The viewfinder mount itself is very customizable. You can adjust the in and out point as well as the rotation quite easily. And then, let me level that back out. And then you also have a lot of functionality on the viewfinder. On the top of the viewfinder, you have a number of different buttons. You have a menu button, which I'll show you here in a little bit. You have another record, start, stop button, 2 programmable viewfinder buttons, an exposure check button that gives you basically like a zebra exposure type check inside your viewfinder itself, and then a peaking button a dedicated peaking button that turns peaking on and off if you really want to check focus on the fly and you're operating off the viewfinder. Those are all right here on the top, so you can easily use them when you're in a handheld mode and access them without having to interrupt your shot. The viewfinder also serves as your menu interface for a lot of features on this camera. So right here where it says ARRI, this actually will pop off and flip around, go like so you can go ahead and access the menus. You can also use this as a monitor if you really want. By pressing the menu button on the top of the viewfinder, you'll go ahead and change the menu, change it from menu mode to monitor mode. And this is operating independently of the display inside the viewfinder itself, and also operating independently of the SDI out monitor. So let's go back into the menu mode right now. This is where you're going to do most of your menu navigation. In here is where you kind of input all the really specific nitty-gritty things of your settings. So let's start with FPS, or frames per second, right here at the top. Right now I can easily see that I'm at 23.976. I can go in here and change it to basically whatever value I want. The ARRI is really cool. It'll shoot up to 200 frames per second right now in the current firmware build, which is nice and fast, faster than an Alexa will go. And if you don't see the specific frame rate that you want to shoot at, it's like say that you really want to get a shot off at 87 frames per second, you can go into the menu here, click add, and dial in whatever exact frame rate you want. 87, you can even get really, really specific if you have a need to. If you're doing like high-speed stuff under strobe lights or something, you can really dial that in. I'm going to go ahead and click back and not actually add that. This menu is really easy to navigate. You have buttons up here that quickly correspond with the on-screen menu to tell you what is going to do what and which function. A back button, a home button, and then a little dialing wheel that you use to find and select things. So let's go ahead and hit back there. You have a time code menu here. Gives you your project rate, options such as like record run, free run, non-drop frame, standard time code settings. So let's go into shutter angle right now. Shutter angle is set, that little icon up there shows that it's being controlled by the switch. Right now the user switch is set to control shutter angle, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees. I could go ahead and set this and dial in specific shutter values that I like. I can switch the units from angle to time if I really wanted to, or I can add new shutter angles and dial in specific values that I want to have in there if I'm trying to get a really specific shutter angle to match. So far everything's pretty self-explanatory. Same thing with EI, exposure index, which is your ISO. Right now this is going to control the ISO settings on the exposure index user switch right here. Quickly can go through here, set it to wherever I like it. The max it'll go up to is 3200, which would be a little bit noisy, but like I said, the ARRI stays pretty clean even up to like around 1600. Some people's tolerances might even be able to tolerate it up to around 2000 ISO. As I mentioned earlier, white balance is here where you can set preset white balance values, dial them into whatever you really like. And you can also change things like, if I go into add, I can change specific things like our green, magenta, green tint. The look menu is pretty interesting. The look menu is where you determine what look is being applied to all the different camera outputs that you have going, as well as what look is being recorded to your internal media. So if I go into here, I can see that my look right now is Rec 709, and it's being but I'm actually recording into log C, which log C is the high dynamic range, wide gamut log style recording mode that the ARRI has, which is what you really want to shoot in if you want like the most possible latitude in your image, so that your colorist or your editor can really push the envelope with your footage. But if I wanted to, I could go in here and go ahead and change my recording to the look, and that's going to have me recording with whatever look I have set currently in the menu, which right now is set to Rec 709. But I can go ahead and change that if I want. If I go ahead and click the set button, I can change from Rec 709